Welcome back to Let's Play The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. Kids, our journey through Hyrule is coming to a close. We are embarking on our last adventure together. I can't warp here! I guess we're not headed on our last adventure together. Let me recalibrate my my ocarina here. I like how it interrupted my song. Like 3 notes into the song, just brrr! No warpies allowed. And who did that? Was that Navi? Was it Navi, like, interrupting my song? And did she burp like that? Was that her burp noise? So, our journey through Ocarina of Time, if my cuts over there in Sony Movie Studio can be believed, around 30-ish episodes or so, around 30 installments to this series, which at about 20 minutes per episode or so, rounds out to about 10 hours. And I want to impart to you guys, as this cutscene plays, that when this game first came out in 1998, I didn't burn through it in 10 hours, that's for sure. I didn't... back then it was very rare for me to play a game very, very quickly. My playing habits were much different when I was a teenager than they are now. Nowadays, I'm an adult. I've got a lot of pressures on my time. Even though my job is playing video games, believe it or not, that still does impart pressures on my game playing time. As much as I love playing games, it's actually very rare that I get to play a brand new game that I'm excited to play. Whereas back when I was a teenager, I had way fewer games, but every individual game I got was pretty much something I'd been looking forward to, at least for a little while. So I had much more of an opportunity to savor games back then. So when you watch this YouTube series, I think it's very important to know that you're watching a game that I've played many times, a very large, a very broad, a very open game with a million little things. A million little things. You could just look at the comments throughout the video series. I'm sure players of the game will point out little things that I skipped or missed or failed to note, and a lot of those things are things that I discovered the first time I played this game and really savored it. The Nintendo 64 did not track how long you spent playing a particular game. Back then, some games would track, would have timers. Usually RPGs would have timers. Here's how long you spent playing this game, but typically Nintendo games didn't do that. Actually, I think Breath of the Wild might be the first Zelda game that actually does. On the loading screens, one of your little tooltips that pop up, that screen shows you your time played. I think 10 hours of playtime in Ocarina of Time, the first time that I played it, that sentence had the word time in it a lot. I think 10 hours might have gotten me through Dodongo's Cavern, maybe, because I really devoured this game, and I savored every inch of it. When I was streaming, there's the map in this game in where Jabu Jabu is, Zora's Fountain, up behind Zora's Domain. And it's kind of a strange map. You've got these big logs poking up out of the water, and you've got weird interaction between Link and the logs, and where he can stand, some of the geometry is a little weird. On that one map, I probably spent... I told this story on stream, and it was funny to me, because I hadn't thought about it for many, many years, but I must have spent just hours on both versions of that map. Because there is a Scarecrow point, and this was before I had learned about how the Scarecrow's song worked. I hadn't figured that part out yet, but I spent hours on that map. But maybe if I stand right here on this log at this point, what can I see from here? What can I reach with my weapons? Can I hookshot anything? What if I do a backflip off of here? I didn't give every individual map that level of attention in the game. For example, I think I mentioned I didn't even realize that the flying carpet riding hippie bomb chew salesman was a character the first few times I played the game. But I want to give you this information at the beginning of the end here, because Ocarina of Time proves that a game can be extremely big and deep without having to be repetitive, without having to be derivative, without having to be copy-paste, without having to have filler shoved into it at every conceivable angle. That's a very, very rough distinction, especially nowadays, because the big trend now, back in the day, around this time, when Ocarina came out, the big trend was towards, like, platformers were, like, on the way out still, because the N64 was really hot, but the big trend at the time, JRPGs were really big, especially on the PlayStation. And then on the PC, like, first-person shooters were really big at the time. And there were some RPG series on the PC that were becoming very big. But nowadays, like, the big thing is the open-world game. And I'm not a fan of the open-world game. There are open-world games I have enjoyed. Despite my kvetching throughout this series, which I really made, believe it or not, I really made an effort to rein that back, to really, I did enjoy that aspect of Breath of the Wild. When I played it, the open world exploration, the time you spend in the overworld just enjoying the land, I felt very, very good with. I spent about 40 hours in that game. Just doing that, just playing around in the overworld, seeing what trouble I could get into, picking on moblins, you know how you do. But Breath of the Wild, for me at least, was a bit of an oddity because I typically don't get into the open world game. And it's because I find most of them to be just very shallow, you know what I mean? Like you play an Ubisoft open world game. God, I can't even think of the most recent Ubisoft. It must have been Assassin's Creed 4. Yeah, I played Assassin's Creed 4. I played, I don't know, maybe 20 hours of that. About 20 hours or so of Grand Theft Auto 5. About 20 hours or so of Just Cause 3. You know, the nickel and dime stuff. But the open world games, they have this bullet point. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of gameplay. And I just find a lot of that to be shallow. I need fire arrows here. Let's just see if... Okay. Yeah, because as soon as I fire an arrow over here... There we go. Now I know where the platforms are. Actually, I think these platforms will disappear. Oh, there's a like. I forgot. There's a like. Don't eat me. Don't eat me. Don't eat me. Oh, buddy. I guess one fire arrow is enough for a like. Thank goodness. I forgot he was there. What was I was talking about open world games. I'm very wary of the hundreds of hours of gameplay. Because, yeah, your game has 100 hours of gameplay, but I'm wasting all my magic here. There we go. Like, okay, your game has 100 hours of gameplay, but what does that gameplay actually entail? Does it entail jumping into a hole like a schnook? I hope so. That light's back, but this time, we're going to kill him from back here with regular arrows. We've got plenty of arrows. I'm not worried about running out of arrows. Magic might be an issue. But think about the last open world game you played, okay? How much of that game was actually... I guess enjoyable is the wrong word, because if you didn't enjoy it, you wouldn't have played it, obviously. But how much of that game do you feel was really worth it in the end? And how much of it was just the repetitive running around and doing the side quests? How much of it was chasing down collectible dots on a map over and over and over again? The same 6 or 8 collectibles repeatedly until you filled up a whole list and your bar was complete. And I want to draw this distinction because that's what a quote-unquote like big game is now. When a game is big, when a game is go anywhere, do anything, you can go anywhere, you can explore everything. There's a million things to do. There's 110 hours of gameplay. I didn't get 110 hours of gameplay out of Ocarina of Time back in the day. I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, the game did take me a minute to finish. It didn't take me 110 hours. I would be surprised if it took me more than 40 the first time I played it. And even that might be, even that might be a little steep. But, god dang it, Link. I had to stop talking because I saw that coming before it happened and I was powerless to stop it. But the time that I spent with Ocarina, when I was a teenager, when the game first came out, whether it was 30 hours or 40, I can't really recall the exact number, but every moment of it was meaningful. Never in Ocarina of Time did I, even when I was hunting down the Skulltulas and things, I didn't feel like any moment of it was just going through the motions. I felt that every second of Ocarina was worth what I was putting into it. And I still feel that way today. I still feel that way now that I'm quite a bit older and I've gone back to the game as an adult. It doesn't waste my time. It doesn't second guess me as a player. It doesn't tell me what I should be enjoying. It trusts that by the virtue that I've purchased the game, going into it as a semi-intelligent consumer, kind of knowing what the game was going to be, it trusts enough that I'm going to like it on its terms. It doesn't try to be things that it's not. This is not something that I think a lot of modern games do well. I mentioned some Ubisoft sandbox games, and I touched a little bit on why I don't play them, and this is part of the reason why, is because when I do play those games, it really feels like they're not confident in what they want to be. It really feels like, hey man, I bought Grand Theft Auto because I like being an amoral, bank robbing dude who hops in an ambulance and runs over prostitutes. Like, I didn't buy Grand Theft Auto because I want to play the stock market. I didn't buy Grand Theft Auto because I want to go in and play this virtual pinball machine. I certainly didn't buy Grand Theft Auto because I want to take goddamn helicopter lessons. So when those games come out and they try to be all things to all people, they're not really fooling me, if that makes sense. They're not really getting away with anything. You can tell when a game is wide as an ocean, but as deep as a puddle, just by spending some time with it. And that's one of the differences between Ocarina and the other Zelda games that came after it. It feels like Ocarina, even though it was the first of its kind, even though this was the one that Nintendo said, hey man, this is our new Zelda paradigm. This is what we've decided a 3D action-adventure game with a focus on exploring and solving dungeons should be. Everything that they've kind of hung onto that core in the years since has at best been superfluous and at worst been a waste of time. So obviously the first one I played after Ocarina was Majora's Mask. I enjoyed Majora's Mask. I know it's a lot of people's favorite. I actually hear this very often when the subject of Ocarina comes up, is that I just doubled my health meter, by the way. That's why my hearts have little white danglies around them now. Yeah. I can take twice as many hits. I don't think I've used a single fairy in this entire playthrough. I don't think I've died once. But yeah, I just doubled my health meter, and I think each fairy's worth 7 or 10 hearts. I got a ridiculous number of hearts. It's fine. Majora's Mask is the pinnacle of the Zelda series for a lot of people, and it's easy to see why, because that game is very focused on exploring, but it's exploring in a very unique way, because instead of exploring a physical space, although that is part of the game, you're actually exploring the timeline of the game. You've got 3 days to accomplish everything in the game you want, and you've got a magic song that you can play to take you back to the beginning of the 3 days as often as you need to. It was fun. I enjoyed Majora's Mask. It doesn't have enough dungeons for my tastes, but I can appreciate as kind of like an off-kilter little like Zelda sequel, kind of. I need my bomb shoes. You there, bomb chew. Do your thing, man. Okay. Because Zelda games were structured that way. I know I'm going to take damage here, but I don't feel like screwing around with these statues. Anyway, there's a heart right here. And anyway, I just doubled my health meter, so what do I care? Because you had Zelda 1 come out, and then you have the sequel to Zelda 1, which is Zelda 2 Adventure of Link, which was something like very different from Zelda 1. Different in a lot of important ways. So, okay, the next Zelda game was Zelda 3, Link to the Past. And it goes back to this kind of top-down Zelda structure, kind of return to form, although it does advance the genre quite a bit as far as like what Zelda games can actually be. And then after it does that, the sequel to Link to the Past comes out as Link's Awakening. Right in there. That's all we needed. And again, Link's Awakening, kind of a very different game from Link to the Past in a lot of ways. And then they did that same procedure again with Ocarina of Time come out. Is like the mainline Zelda game, and then it had its kind of quirky off-kilter sequel in Majora's Mask. Pretty sure we just want to burn this. I guess this means the fire arrows are necessary. You can't win the game without getting the fire arrows. I'm glad I remembered a hand fell down if you hit the wrong sun here. Oh, that was almost terrible. Come on. I guess the next two Zelda games kind of broke that trend. Well, I mean, before that, obviously, you had, like, the CDI Zelda games, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, like, the next ones were the Oracle's games, which came out as kind of like a Pokemon Red and Blue kind of situation. I know that they're different games. They weren't the same game at all, but that's kind of how they were released. But that's how I look at Majora's Mask to this day. I don't really see it as a Zelda game in its own right. I see it as like the quirky little brother of Ocarina of Time. I enjoyed it when I played Majora's Mask. I've done the Hundo. I've done it a couple times, actually. I used to own a cartridge that I kind of, sort of stole from Blockbuster Video, I think? But then after that was Wind Waker, and Wind Waker, it just got too far away from that core of just exploring dungeons and solving them. You just had way too much just extra stuff, and in order to make room for a lot of that extra stuff, the sailing around, the weird collecting ship parts, the mailbox? Huh? Mailbox. The expanded combat system in that game, which I wasn't a big fan. I know a lot of people liked it. Oh. Well, here, you die first. Is everything in here just... invisible? I guess so. In order to make room for a lot of that stuff in Wind Waker, they had to actually... I've read that they cut out dungeons that they were planning on having in order to make room for some of that stuff. Or maybe like there wasn't enough development time to do it all. But the game has too few dungeons and too much other stuff. This isn't going to open this locked door, right? It's going to make a key appear in here, I imagine. And then same thing with Twilight Princess, because Twilight Princess came out, and my goodness. My entire first play session with Twilight Princess, I got my Wii, I had it at launch. Twilight Princess in the Wii at launch. I want to say it, like, I did my entire first play session with Twilight Princess. So it had to have been 7 or 8 hours or so. Do I have time to get all these? Because I missed one over here. Dang it! And then we'll just go up top. Yeah, the entire first play session had to have been 7 or 8 hours that first night. Had to have been. Didn't even make it to the first dungeon. Oh. That easy, huh? Oh, I need to break these first. We want to make sure we get our magic and arrows, and we keep them as high as possible.
Shoutouts to A Cardboard Box for sponsoring this video, and to everybody who helps make my channel possible by supporting me on Patreon.